And the deeper issue is a misunderstanding of church itself. And that is the theological level. And this is what many people don't know. John Piper, sometimes called the godfather of Calvinism, set off a firestorm when he tweeted simply asking whether or not we should really be drinking coffee in the sanctuary on Sunday. This seemingly innocuous tweet opened the floodgates of response. And I want to explore a much, much deeper issue of what this tells us about our view of church, worship, and the dangers of drawing unnecessary lines in Christianity. Let's take a look at his tweet that's gotten so much attention. He said, "Can we reassess whether Sunday coffee sipping in the sanctuary fits?" Wow. And then Hebrews 12, "Let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and with awe." I like John Piper. We disagree in big, significant ways theologically. He seems like a very real, humble guy, a guy that I have a lot of love for, even though we sit on very different theological. I think he's very intellectually honest as well, and I really appreciate that about him. I imagine he just was like thinking through this. He visited a church and everyone was drinking coffee, or a couple people brought coffee into the Sunday service where he was preaching. And he's like, I wonder what 5 people think about this. And now, like 2.7 million views later and thousands of comments and hundreds of retweets, now it's become kind of this whole just melee of opinion. And people are very divided on this. You know, a lot of people are like, dude, you're out of touch. This is just how we create a hospitable environment. Other people are like, that's right, man. This is the sanctuary. We should be dressed to the nines. We should show up. We should, obey, keep your kids quiet. No running in the sanctuary, no coffee in the sanctuary. Literally, I've seen people like coffee is actually a drug. It's just like a milder form of cocaine. And I'm like, dude, I did a milder form of cocaine 4 times today. So you can find anything on Twitter. And, this to me could be a nothing. What I actually think it does is it draws into focus as believers how we think about church and how we think about our practice as Christians. And this is something that I think would be valuable as believers to think more deeply about. And if you are not a believer, you're not convinced of the claims of Christianity, I hope you'll stick around, because by the end of this, I'm going to get to something that most people, even in the church, don't know about church. And I think it is a key issue that completely reformatted what we do at MetaChurch and how we think about who we are to the community around us. There's kind of these 3 levels to how things actually function in the church when they function correctly. And I don't think a lot of people think this deeply about it. And that's maybe one of the problems. The 3 layers on the very outside is like methodology. And this is the most surface level. And that's just the methods, what we do. Do we have a band or do we have a choir? Do we have a big warehouse or do we have a cathedral? Do we drink coffee or is that irreverent? Do we wear suits and ties or do we wear jeans and t-shirts? Those are our methods that we use. Do the kids sit in Sunday service or do they go to a kids program? Those are all just methods. Underneath methods, there is the philosophy. You have methodology. Under that is philosophy. Philosophy is how we think about the church, and how we think about the church then informs the methods we use for the church. But most people stop at philosophy when the truth is, at the very core of our decision-making is our theology. And theology is what we believe about God, and theology more broadly is how we believe about the scriptures. And so our theology informs our philosophy, which informs our methodology. And so the methodology is, should we have coffee or not? And that's silly. It's like, who cares? But I think it points deeper. And so let's go one layer deeper into the philosophy. Romans 15:7 says, therefore, welcome one another, just as Christ also welcomed you to the glory of God. And you can pull up hundreds of verses just like this that are focused on hospitality. And the people who have coffee, they have some kind of coffee ministry. You come in, you get a free cup of coffee. To them, that's a philosophy, how I think about church. I want church to be comfortable. I want there to be a great environment. There's a reason people do work at Starbucks, because it smells good and it's a community feeling and there's people around you, and extroverts have a hard time just locking themselves in an office all by themselves. So they go to Starbucks and they drink coffee. And I don't know if you think Starbucks coffee is good coffee, but it's coffee, and they're in a community, and so they want that feeling. They want you to show up and be like, man, we have something for you. There's something in mind. In 1 Corinthians, it talks about Christian liberty, like how we should actually think about these divisive issues, like, I guess, drinking coffee during Sunday services. Paul says everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible, but not everything builds up. And so where do you land? Is drinking coffee something that's beneficial? Does it build people up? No one is to seek his own good, but the good of the other person. Now, that is going to be the key to understanding the rest of this text. Do not seek your own good, seek the good of the other person. Now they're going to talk about dietary laws, which is kind of out of our purview, but I think it's helpful nonetheless. Eat everything that is sold in the meat market without raising questions for the sake of conscience, since the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. If any of the unbelievers invites you over and you want to go, eat everything that's set before you without raising questions for the sake of conscience. But if they say to you, this food is from a sacrifice, like it had been sacrificed to an idol, don't eat it out of consideration for the one who told you in the sake of conscience. I do not mean your own conscience, but again, the other person's. For why is my freedom judged by another person's conscience? If I partake with thanksgiving, why am I criticized because of something for which I give thanks? So here it is. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do everything for the glory of God. And how does he define the glory of God? He seems to equate doing things for the glory of God very closely with doing things in consideration of others. And so at MetaChurch, which is my context, it's where I'm the lead pastor, on the philosophical level, something that we have done very intentionally that does set us apart in our methodology is we're always looking outward. And the problem with John Piper's question to me on a philosophical level, and we're not even to the deepest level yet, which is the theological, which I think we're going to learn something very interesting. But on the philosophical level, my biggest problem is it's a question that's facing inward. I don't know exactly what his problem is with it. He just wants to reassess it, simple suggestion. But it's an inward facing comment. Like we as the church people, as the insiders, as the members, like what do we think about this? What do we think about this as the leaders and the pastors and the people calling the shots and in charge of the ministries? How does it affect us? And this is typical of how the church has tended to think about itself over the years, again, because of a theological concept we'll get to in a minute. What we start with at MetaChurch, at least our goal is to start with thinking externally. And this is what Jesus did. Jesus said, we're not going to be another religion that just tries to take care of ourselves, but we're going to go into the world and preach the gospel. As you are going, as you're meeting with people in your rhythm of life, tell people the good news about Jesus. It's outward focused. So at MetaChurch, we have a specific person in mind. We're trying to reach people who are unchurched or dechurched, or even people who are anti-church. And what we want to do is certainly create a hospitable environment. And we've really thought through this because pre-pandemic, we had a coffee ministry. Just for practical reasons, it's not back yet. But we didn't just think like we like coffee and people like coffee. We thought about the user experience of someone who is unchurched. They've never gone to church. All they know about it are documentaries they've seen or horror stories from friends or whoever invited them to MetaChurch. Not a horror story from someone who invited them to MetaChurch. Wow. A good story. That's why they're there. The de-churched person, which means they went to church, probably were hurt along the way or lost their faith and left for a season and now they're back. We have a lot of people who are strong believers. And in the worship, the musical part of the worship, usually more than half of the hands in the room are up and people are singing loudly. You're unchurched, de-churched, or anti-church. You're not there yet. To have something in your hand, it makes you comfortable. You don't know the words, you don't know the melody. To have something to just drink, to sit back, to relax. It's almost like a blanket for people to make them comfortable. And if we can get people in the seats and not make them feel just scared to death to even be there, there's a chance they will open their ears and allow the Holy Spirit to speak to their hearts. And so we went through a very intentional process to decide to put that ministry in place. And I know a lot of people at Meta hope it comes back, and a lot of us hope it comes back someday as well. On the philosophical level, are you thinking inside or are you thinking outside? Are you thinking about the other person? No one is to seek his own good, but the good of the other person. Are you focused on othering people, on getting people in, on what they're thinking and how they're experiencing the world and what their emotions are walking into a church service for the first time? And so that's the methods that come from the philosophy, but it goes deeper. And the deeper issue is a misunderstanding of church itself. And that is the theological level. And this is what many people don't know. Years ago, I studied church, like the word church, as deeply as I know how to study something. There are people a lot smarter than me, but for me, this was as deep as I know how to go. It took me about 6 months. And part of the reason is because when I was young and I started in church work, I got very discouraged. I kind of wondered at some points if I needed the local church, if I could just be like me and Jesus just vibing and doing our own thing and being a itinerant musician or something like that. The first time the word church is used is in Matthew 16. It's Jesus, and he says, and I say to you that you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. I will build my church. What's interesting is that word in the Greek, church, is the word ecclesia. Jesus could have picked any number of religious or spiritual words. He could have said, on this rock I will build my synagogue, or on this rock I will build my temple, but he didn't. He said, I will build my ecclesia. That's how it's recorded in the original Greek of the New Testament. And ecclesia is not a religious word. It's actually a political word. And I know politics has a bad vibe for us today, but it comes from the Greek word polis, which P-O-L-I-S, which is just the city, for the good of the city. Ecclesia is translated the called out. It's a compound word, ek, out of, kleo, called. It's the called out people. The way an ecclesia was formed is people were called out of their normal rhythms of life. They were gathered together. They galvanized around an issue in their society, something they wanted to improve or implement or change. They all were given assignments. They met together, and then they moved together to affect change in their community. That's why at MetaChurch, our subscript for the church at large, the simplest definition we could come up with, is people meeting together and then moving together. And this really matters because ecclesia is about people. And over the years, the word church took on the connotation of a place, the house of the Lord. In German, Old German, ecclesia was translated into Kirche, which meant the house of the Lord, which became the English church. And again, it took on the house of the Lord, which means church is a building. And if church is a building, that's your theological presupposition, and it's not just any building, it's the house of the Lord, then how you think about that is you need a big, beautiful building with a lot of unwritten rules to protect it. You need a sanctuary, and the sanctuary is sacred, which means you don't dare drink coffee, a milder form of cocaine. You don't dare run in the sanctuary. Whole churches will divide over choosing the color of the carpet because you're not just putting something down for people to stand on, you are actually furnishing God's own house.
Wow.
This theological misunderstanding of church has huge philosophical implications, and it is one of the reasons why people tend to look inward. People try to protect the building itself. People try to create environments inside the building itself to protect the glory of God, when what God tells you to do is look out for the good of others. Love God and love the people around you radically and unapologetically. The church is a people. It's not a place. It's not a Sunday service or a Sunday night service. It's not an organization. It's not a 501c3 nonprofit. That's a way to organize the church, but the church is the people. And the people are called to meet together and then to go into the world and move together. And the question should be, how do we reach the most people? And I really liked some of the discussion during this Coffeegate John Piper scandal. There was a black pastor of a predominantly black church, and he was like, look, for us, our Sunday services are a party. Like, you couldn't bring coffee in there because we are up and we are moving. It's not going to work. And I love that. It's like he thought through that. We're going to create such a joyous environment in our Sunday services that it's going to attract people who are just labored by the heaviness of the world around them. And they're going to come in. But for us, just like theologically, philosophically, methodologically, it doesn't make sense. For you, it might be the exact perfect thing. But the question shouldn't be, is drinking coffee like an awe-inspiring and reverent enough form of worship? True and undefiled worship, according to the Old Testament, is being with the widows and the orphans in their distress. It's outward facing. And so our job to worship God, to give him our attention and affection, to show our love for him, is to go after the people that he loves the most. And if coffee does that for you, great. If it doesn't, great. But just know you should start with your theology and you should work your way out to the glory of God and reaching as many people as possible. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Clayton Tyner podcast. If you want to watch the full podcast, you can check that out somewhere right around here. And if you want to subscribe, you can do that right over here somewhere. Also, you can follow me at Clayton Tyner. That's Tyner on Twitter and Instagram. I would love for you to subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with everything that we're doing.